This video is brought to you by the Abbey Community School Society. All right, welcome back. So we're just going to jump right in. Continuing on, so we talked about how we were going to code the bird. So let's go into the bird folder here. Double click in the bird folder, and we need to build the bird. So the way Godot works is you build scenes for each object that you have. You don't have to do it this way. You could throw a bunch of objects or behaviors or nodes into a single scene, but that's not the best way to do it. The best way to do it is to build your objects independent of each other, individually. Once they work and they're tested in their own little scenes, you can combine all the scenes together. So that's kind of what we're going for here. So I'm going to start with the bird. Click the bird folder. I'm going to click other nodes. So every scene needs a root node. So our root node for the bird is going to be not one of these three, but it's going to be an other node. And the node that I want to make is a area 2D. Oops. So you can search in the bar up here. I'm going to create an area 2D node and then click create, or you can also double click. This is our first node. Area 2D is a node that can influence physics and also detect physics. I'm going to rename it. So right click, rename, and call this bird. This is our bird. There's an exclamation mark saying that it needs a collider and a collision shape. We'll add those in a little bit. First, we're going to add a sprite to it. Sprite is the image. So if I right click, add child node, I'm going to search for sprite. And there you go. I've got the sprite and create. At this point, when I have the sprite selected, I can go over to the right hand side here into the inspector, into the texture part, click this little drop down. Click the load button, go to my bird folder and find the bird.png image and click open. Now using the middle mouse button, I can pan and zoom in so I can see what's going on. So perfect, I've got my bird loaded into the game. The only problem is I'm seeing both birds. That's not ideal. So to fix that, I can go into animation and vertical frames. So I only have one row of frames, so I can leave that at 1. Horizontal frames, I have 2. 1, 2. So I'm going to increase this by 1. As soon as I do that, you can see that Godot automatically takes out one of the images, and because now it knows that there's 2 images or 2 smaller images in the bigger image, and so I only need to see one at a time. And if I swap the frame value between 0 and 1, 0 is meaning the first image, 1 is the second image in the list. If I was to swap this variable, then I can choose which image to currently show to the player. Perfect. So that's good. I've got my sprite set up. I'm going to move on. So I need to add this magical collider that it's asking for. So I'm going to right click, add a child node, and I'm going to search for collision. And the thing I need is a collision shape 2D. Let's click create. There we go. Exclamation mark is still there, and that's because it needs a actual shape. So on the right hand side under shape, I'm going to click the drop down and click capsule shape. There it goes. There's my capsule shape. I can try and reshape this to match the size of my bird, but the problem is it's too big. On the top and bottom it's too big. So what I really need to do, because this capsule is this shape, is I need to rotate it 90 degrees. So to rotate something, and you can rotate anything, you need to find the node 2D part, the transform part of it, and then type in the rotation that you want. So I want to rotate it by 90 degrees, which is a quarter turn. There we go. So I've got this shape to match my bird now. Good. So I've got the collider. So I've got the sprite, the collider. Let's just rename this to something else. So we'll call this collider. Notice how it's a lowercase c. This is kind of important. I'm actually going to rename the sprite as well to be with a lowercase. So sprite was lowercase, collider was lowercase. Now we just need to add the last two things, which are these 2 sounds. So I'm going to go to bird, click add child node, and we want to play. We want to add a audio stream player specifically. I can double click this, and I'm going to rename this to be sound flap. Please note that I use the lowercase s for the sound and capital F for flap. Once I've renamed it, I can go over to the stream part, click the little drop down, load, go to my bird, and select the flap wave, and open. Perfect, so that is done. I just need to do this one more time for the collision sound. So let's go bird, add child node, audio stream player, right click, rename, sound, it's called sound collision. Make sure it's selected, go over to the stream on the right hand side, click on load, bird, and collision. Perfect. So at this point, the bird is set up. I've got all the components that I need to be able to, I've got the graphics, I've got the collider, and I've got the sounds. The bird is ready to go. Now I just need to code it. So coding is a little bit more complicated. It might be a little scary at first, but I'm going to take my time trying to explain it very slowly. If this is the first time you're seeing code, like this will be total gibberish to you. But if you've seen code before, it might make some sense. So let's attach a script. So let me show that again. So right click on bird, click attach script. Scripts are what give objects their behaviors. That they're using code, you can tell it how to behave. I don't want to put it into the main folder. I want to put it into the bird folder, so I'm just going to double click the bird folder. Okay, just like that. I can actually make it an empty script, so template can be empty, and then click create. Perfect. So let's start. Extends to area 2D, that just means everything that an area 2D can do, this script can also do. It can take information from an area 2D type of script or library. And let's start with our variables. So variables are what contain numbers or things. So I'm going to create some variables. The first two variables I'm going to export. Exporting means that if you export a variable in Godot, it'll be editable in the inspector. So on the right hand side here, I'll be able to edit these variables. Even though I'm not in the script, I can edit them in the game to change their values. So things like jumping speed and gravity and things like that, you want them to be exported. Var just means it's a variable. And then finally, I just need to give them some names. These are totally arbitrary names, but I give them names that make sense to me as the coder. So jump speed, by default, I think I'm just going to set it to 150, and then export int. Int means integer, which is mathematics, whole numbers. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. And this one is going to be my down force. And this one I think I'm going to set to 5. So these are my two variables that I can edit. Other variables that are hidden from the editor, so things that I shouldn't need to edit, are things like my vertical speed, so how fast the bird is moving. So for once again, you do need to type var, vertical speed, and set this one to 0. And var points, set this one to 0 as well. So vertical v speed is my vertical speed, how fast I'm moving up and down. Points is how many points I've got so far in the game. Moving on, so we're going to go into our first function. Functions are something that you can put all the logic into. And when I talked about how games work, there was this one function that I thought mentioned, which was process. So process is the thing that happens between every single frame. So whatever I type down here, this script is going to run or do every single frame. So 60 times a second, most likely. Okay, so moving on. Also, when I'm moving from line to line, all I'm doing is I'm pressing the enter key. And when I need to tab in or move indent a little bit, I press the tab key on my keyboard. Okay, so first let's deal with our vertical speed. So I'm going to take my vertical speed and increase it by downforce. So this is something that happens regardless what your character is doing. I'm always going to be increasing my vertical speed by gravity. Downforce is kind of like gravity. Next, I want to check to see if we're pressing the space bar. So before we do that, we do need to move a little bit away from here and just make sure we know what the space bar is. So we can go to project settings. There's a section called input map. And these are all the keys that come default. So these ones you can't really delete or change, or you can change them, but you can't delete them. So these are all keys that the game needs to be able to do things like with the UI and stuff. So I did notice there is a section here called UI accept, and it does have the spacebar, which is great. I can use that, but I also want to show you guys how to create new actions. So I'm just going to create a button called jump. Click add. And now at the bottom of the list, I got this button called jump. And I can add a key to it or add an event. And the event's going to be my key. And when I click key, I can press the spacebar and click OK. So whenever I press the spacebar, this key will be registered as someone pressed it. Okay. You can close this window. Let's go back to our script here. Also, if you ever lose the script, so if you're ever like, I don't know, editing the bird, you can always go up to the top here and click the script button. Okay, so how do we check if this key is being pressed? Well, I can go if input, so input's a library that manages all the keys. And then I can start searching, so is action just pressed? So that means it just happened, this frame. And I can do jump, so that's the key that I created. So what this means is any code that I type after this if statement or the if conditional will happen only if this jump key was pressed. Also, you probably notice as I'm typing, autocomplete happens quite often. Autocomplete is when the computer kind of guesses what you want to type or gives you some suggestions and you can choose from the list. It really speeds up your coding if you're doing that. Another thing, when you're coding like this, make sure you copy what I'm typing word for word. Every symbol, space, everything needs to be just like mine. Otherwise, there might be a chance that the game will not run. Okay, so what happens when the space bar is pressed? Well, first we should play the sound. So to access a child node on an object or on a parent node, you can do the $sign and type in or look for these nodes. So I want the sound flap. So you can just double click it. So now I'm accessing this thing and I can use all the things that it can do. And one of the things it can do is play. And that's all I need to do. So sound flap.play, that plays the sound. Also, when you press the spacebar, we need to set our vertical speed to be equal to our jump speed. And actually, sorry, it should be negative jump speed. A lot of game engines flip your vertical. So a positive number in the vertical or on the y-axis is actually going down, and the negative number is actually going up. And then one more thing I want to do is I want to kind of rotate the bird. So I'm going to set the rotation degrees to be equal to -35. So that just means I'm rotating the bird a little bit to the left, counterclockwise. Okay. That's all we need to do when the spacebar is pressed. So moving on. So what happens if our vertical speed is greater than 0? So as I said, if the value is a positive number, then you're moving down. So if our bird is moving down, that means that we need to be displaying, we need to be changing the sprite that you see. So I can go, once again, $sign, select this sprite, put a period to access the properties within the sprite. And the one that I want to change is my frame. So set frame. And I'm going to set the frame to be frame 1. So when I'm moving down, my wing should be up, which makes sense. That's the second image. Otherwise, that you can do by typing else. I want my sprite dot set frame to be the other image, which is our image 0. There we go. And finally, I want to increase my rotation degrees. Every frame I want to be increasing my rotation degrees by a tiny amount. So I do 0.5. The difference between equals and plus equals is that when you do equals, it changes this value, this variable, to be this new value. When you do plus equals, it takes whatever this value is. So for example, -35. And would add 0.5 to it, so it becomes something like -34.5, and so on. Okay, so this is the process. Now to see this in action, we can actually go back to our 2D view, and if we press this button here, play scene or F6. Yes, we should save it. So the scene has never been saved. Save before running, yes. We can save the scene into the bird folder and save it as bird.tscn and save. Okay. So my bird is up there. For some reason, he is not falling. So there's a glitch in our script. Let's go back to our script. Oh, obviously. Or maybe not obviously. The problem is we did set our vertical speed. Vertical speed is a random variable that we came up with. It has nothing to do with the actual character. So to change the position of the character, you need to go position.y, that's our vertical position, and make it plus equal. So we're going to take its current spot and add our v speed to it. And that will change our bird's position. We do need to multiply our vertical speed by our delta though. So delta, which comes from here, is a variable that contains how much time has passed since the previous frame. It's very important that you do this with anything that's physics related or almost any logic related really, because these process functions will not always be happening at the exact same pace. Sometimes your computer slows down, sometimes it speeds up. So this thing just keeps track of how much time has passed since the last frame. And if you multiply our v speed by this number, then the game will function the same regardless of how many frames you get. So if we press the play button again, or play scene button, there you go. You can see the bird is falling, it's rotating, even flapping its wings. It's kind of hard to see, but that is all right. Okay, so let's save again, scene, save scene. And with that, the bird is mostly done. In the next video, we'll move on to making the other nodes. Thank you for watching and see you soon.